Hi, and welcome to another edition of Seniors Today. I'm your host, Tom Bartee, and today our guest is Mr. Buck Kamphausen of Skyview Memorial Lawn. Welcome, Buck.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here. It's a little warm, so it's nice and cool in here, so we can stay here all afternoon if you want.
That's right. Maybe we should do another show tomorrow. It's supposed to be in the 90s.
Well, all right.
But anyway, I appreciate you being here. I know how busy you are. It's hard for me to know where to start in an interview with you because you are the Renaissance man, and you do so many things, and you have so many varied interests, and you do so much for Vallejo. I thought, well, maybe we'll just start with your primary business with Skyview Memorial Lawn. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I grew up in Colorado, and as a youngster, of course, a farm kid, and started working in the fields when I was about 12, and then I had an interest in medicine and helping people, and some way I got to drive an ambulance when I was 16, and then I got a part-time job at the local mortuary, which had a mortuary and a furniture store. We only had 3,000 people in town, so you could do a lot of various jobs in town, and it was always fun because you could walk down the street. One day you were washing dishes in a restaurant. Next day you were delivering groceries to senior. The next day you were pumping gas. So it was always some adventure and a learning curve. So I started working part-time in the mortuary just after graduating from school at 17. And I knew I wanted to go to college, and I started my college career I spent first 6 months up at the University of Colorado, and then went to the University of Denver, and drove an ambulance and worked at the mortuary and other adventuresome things like building fences and plowing fields and moving or shoveling snow. So, but I eventually came to California to go to mortuary college in San Francisco, and it became a great career for me. I did go back to Colorado for a year and then came out here to California. They say once you see California 3 times, you stay, so I stayed. So I worked in Sacramento with a family that I'd met. 2 sons had gone to the same mortuary school in San Francisco. And I was really impressed with the mortuary cemetery combination up there, because the mortuary from Colorado was a very small facility. So I thought this is a real chance to learn the full operation of these things. And then as time went on, I got lucky, and somebody directed me to Vallejo, an opportunity to acquire the place here in Vallejo, and to also acquire a place in Fairfield, all at the same time. And so I had a new partner who had been in the business for some time, and started out that way. And that was 1971, August of 1971. And so I had also taken up scuba diving in Sacramento just prior to moving here. And I had my teaching certificate in scuba. And on one of the runs that we used to do, a scuba run down the American River, we found a MGB in about 20 feet of water. We notified the sheriff. The sheriff said, okay, but we're not going to do anything about that. So I had a friend who had a tow truck and a mechanic shop. So I did my first commercial dive and hooked a tow cable to this car. We sat in it with scuba gear as they pulled it out of the water. And I got a whole $200. And that started my career also in commercial diving. And there was a school in Oakland called Coastal School of Deep Sea Diving. I became friends with the owner, and I learned a lot of things about the commercial diving without going to the school. And I got small dive jobs up in the Sacramento area. I was diving on the Sunrise Bridge, on a bridge below the bridge that had been removed except for the pilings. And somebody had dove off the bridge underneath the bridge and hit one of these pilings. And so in order to transfer the title of the property to the county, they wanted those pilings removed. And a Saturday afternoon, I was cutting a piling off, having tied myself into the piling and cutting it off in a river. And at that time, I was using what they call a KMB9, a plastic face mask with a band, and then the scuba gear, but had communications and air supplied from the surface. So the person attending me said, "There's a gentleman up here that wants to talk to you." So I did come up and met the president of PMI, which is quite a large organization of a company which does all of the plumbing pipe work in the refineries, and they built all of the plumbing work in the Anheuser
The brewery.
brewery up here in Fairfield. So they had a project of trash racks up at Oroville Dam that had a failure of stainless steel welds. And the trash racks are a system of racks to protect the turbines from tree limbs or any kind of trash going in down into the turbine, which is down below the bottom of the lake. And most people don't realize the huge powerhouse that we have up in Oroville. But 400 feet below the lake is a cavern that you could fit the whole state capitol building in. And there's 6 turbines in there for generating electricity. And there's 2 what they call penstocks that drop in from the bottom into those turbines. And they drop 1 million gallons of water a minute in each one of those penstocks. Well, each penstock, or each 3 turbines, is fed through a trash rack that's 35 feet wide and probably about 3,000 feet long. So it drops on an angle into the lake and to the bottom of the lake, depending on the lake level, the depth of the trash rack. So they were only working on a level just right at the surface, just about 12 feet. And they had a barge where they took off racks and brought on new racks. And what had happened at that point, this was an area that they drew water from, and the water going through that area had caused harmonic vibration to the stainless steel racks and cracked them, and therefore deteriorated the rack. The state asked me to do a deeper dive and go down, follow the racks down to other areas where they drew water from. So I went down to maybe 60 feet, found the same problem. Went to another 60 feet or so, found another problem, same thing. Went deeper, found another one. So at that point, the state asked me to come up and literally panicked. And the state released enough water to cause a minor earthquake. So I'm probably the only person in California that I can take responsibility for causing a minor earthquake. So that job turned out to be about 8 months, and part of the requirements of that job was to build a camera that they could inspect every nut, bolt, and washer, because they were all to be changed out with new stainless steel nuts, bolts, and washers. We worked on that job under, and I'm probably the only diver that has worked under the iron workers. We were going down, and they generally go up. And so when we finished this job, after changing trash racks and being there for the length of time, we used that camera on 196,000 nuts, bolts, and washers. We purposely put one steel washer in down at the bottom to see if the state caught it, and they did catch it. We also did what the ironworkers do on the surface. When the topping out ceremony, we had a bottoming out ceremony. And we left a Christmas tree, an American flag, and everybody signed the last rack. So that was an adventure. Part of that adventure, Coppola was filming the Klansman. This was a follow-up to The Godfather, which we had the privilege of meeting a lot of the stars, and we ate with them in the only restaurant, decent restaurant in town, and so we had a lot of adventures. Richard Burton, I got to know fairly well. He was a super easy guy to know. He'd always say, "Hi, Buck," and he told me I'd just call him "Hi, Richard." We were there when he had a little defugaly with Elizabeth Taylor. Lee Marvin, I think he bought me 2 drinks one morning at about 8:30 in the morning. He was the only one in the bar. I was going in to get some supplies for the night. We had to work during the night and sleep during the day so they could run the powerhouses. But he was quite a character and a lot of interesting adventures with the movie company up there at that time. So that's the start of my diving career that paralleled my operation of the mortuaries here, and then I acquired more mortuary cemeteries in California. The second one was Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland, and then Mount Tamalpais Cemetery and Mortuary in San Rafael. Then I was a supplier to the Neptune Society when it was founded. Then we acquired 3 of the territories of Neptune. We developed our own Nautilus Society. With the diving, I also had a boat operation that had to be used on dive work that we did in the bay and so forth. And we used one of those boats. Actually, the first boat was a 24-footer that we used for commercially scattering cremains at sea. And we now have 3 boats that are used that way, certified boats by the Coast Guard. We're in Southern California, Middle California, and Northern California. And we did it first, and we've done it longer. And the boat in Newport Beach is used more than any other boat in the country for scattering cremains at sea. So sort of those 2 businesses just sort of flowed together. The diving business and the scatter boats have been used on diving work.
Oh, so, that's cool.
So,
and those boats are 72-footers?
No, the basic boat is 65.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Coast Guard regulation for what they call a T boat, whether you have to have other built-in bulkheads in the ship itself.
Well, that's a pretty cool introductory history. I know that you probably have way more stories to tell than that, but you know, Colorado is a pretty cool place, and a lot of people with individual motivation and spirit and entrepreneurism probably come from that area, and I'd say you're one of them.
Well, I had the good fortune of growing up there and in a small town. And my dad was an entrepreneur and brought his family out to Colorado when I was less than 1 year old. And he got in the mining business. So at 10 years old, I had the opportunity to spend my 10th birthday at the 13th level of the Strong Mine in Cripple Creek, Colorado, and to blast off my first dynamite. So it was quite a thrill and very unusual. And so I had learned from that and did a lot of prospecting. And then as the mines had closed down, and I had gotten contracts to scrap iron mines to take the steel out, so forth. And we also started taking out support pillars, blasting support pillars out of what they call the drifts. When they hit a vein, they'll drift off a tunnel one way or the up or down. And we take that and take it to the mill. So part of my high school time was spent working in mines and taking the rock down to the mills, and it was profitable but pretty rough work. But it was interesting and fun.
So did you come to Vallejo after 1971?
Oh, no, I came here in 71.
In 71?
Yeah.
And where was the first place that you stayed when you came here?
Where I stayed?
Did you buy a house?
Yes, I did. Shortly after I got the facility here in Vallejo, Skyview, came with a house.
It did?
Yes. We don't own the house now, but it was right around the corner. So we had a house.
Was off Rollingwood or something?
Pope Drive. First house on Pope Drive, right around the
Okay.
corner.
All right.
And eventually my partner took that, he and his wife took that house, and I bought a house on Sandy Beach.
Okay.
Have you heard of Sandy Beach?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. That's one of the cooler places in the Bay Area, actually.
Well, I actually heard the other day that that was probably where Vallejo was first founded, was on Sandy Beach.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at one time, General Mills actually owned up to Lot 47.
I know that, and I know that you were involved with General Mills.
Yeah, but all the General Mills had abdicated their ownership of that parcel probably in the 50s because there were so many squatters, they couldn't deal with it. And so they kind of gave it up, and you know, people ended up going in there, but they couldn't get title to the land because the State Lands Commission wouldn't let them.
That's right.
And so it wasn't until sometime in the 80s, I guess, that they finally were able to get title, and then they could get insurance and all the other things that go along with a normal home ownership.
We just went through another legal process with the State Lands Commission to redefine their territory, and my house is like a lot of them. Parts of my house are 100 years old, and some of a lot of the houses, the older ones, were built by whatever floated by. A big log went by, it became a timber in the house. So, but they just redefined it, and I was paying $275 a year for the land lease, and now I'm at $263. It went down. I think I'm the only one that went down. Everybody else down there was really upset because their houses extended beyond the line that the state drew there.
Yeah, the line they drew for it was the mean tide, something like that.
That's correct.
And a lot of these houses are cantilevered over the water, and when there's the perfect storm, if you will, the high tide, the full moon, and a rain event, some of those places get splashed up pretty good.
Yes, they do. Fortunately, I'm a little higher, but I'm also don't have any land. I have maybe 3 feet that might be mine, and I'm actually built right on the seawall.
Wow.
The start of the house is on the seawall.
Well, a lot of really interesting people still live down there, but over the years have lived down there. And I remember looking at buying one of those places. And it was, you know, it's on the normal MLS market. I go in there, and the countertop was made out of wood, and there was this little round thing. And I open it up, and there's the bay. It was right next to the sink, so they would just scoop the food down right into the hole. It would go right into the bay.
That's why there used to be healthy fish there.
Yeah, there used to be giant sturgeon, probably. But that's always been in my mind, a really cool place down there.
It is. It is a high maintenance area because of the brackish water, and I think my house is about ready to float away. But you have to start redoing things.
Well, you also had the hillside move.
Yes.
And the TV cameras are out there, and And the HOA or whatever you have down there bought a little bobcat
Cat
to
to clean things
clean
off.
the mud away.
We actually had to put in a fire system also, so that they could start their own fire pump. I will say we did have a fire down there years ago. I actually woke up and smelled it. It was just about 4 doors up from me. And I woke the owners up and got out, and they lost some prized cats. But I was amazed how fast the fire department responded and had the fire out. It was amazing. So.
Well, those houses are very close together
Oh yeah,
too, so it could
too
just-
close together.
Could burn the whole
Yes.
strip.
Yeah.
So, in addition to that, all the things you just mentioned, you also have been involved with classic cars and that whole business actually on an international basis. How did you get started in that?
Well, again, starting as a farm kid, we had to fix everything. So I became a pretty good mechanic when I was a kid, and always had a fascination for cars and trucks and so forth. And I also found that I could buy a car and then sell a car. So I did a little of that, going through college too. And in Sacramento, when I was there, I decided, we have all new hearses livery for the funeral business, and there's some pretty cool, neat old hearses out there. Why don't I take one and restore it and see whether there's acceptance for it? So I found one. It was a 1916 Rio Speedwagon with a horse-drawn hearse body put on it. It had been used in South Dakota by a funeral home for 20 years as a horse-drawn hearse and 20 years as a motorized hearse. So it had a 40-year lifespan with a funeral home in a little town in South Dakota. And so we bought it and finished restoration and used it. And people liked it, and the car-oriented people liked it. So then we tried another couple of them. And I had a 40s car, 48, I believe, wood-carved LaSalle. And there was an auction at Blackhawk. And so I was late going over there, and that's the big museum in Blackhawk. And I was late going over there, so I came up, not too many people there. I sat up in the bleachers, midway in the corner bleacher, and here came a Cadillac 4-door, about a 1938, 39, freshly restored. So I bought it, made a bid, and all of a sudden 2 guys popped their heads out from behind the curtain, both of them bearded, looking, well, who bought this? I didn't realize the car had been run through the auction 3 times. No bidders.
Wow.
Here I was, number 1 sucker. So we went to dinner. I really think that they wouldn't have made it back to Canada if I hadn't bought that car. But very quickly, we saw that we had a lot of ideas the same way. They were out from Chatham, Ontario, Canada. So I ended up with 3 Canadians, partners, and myself as the token American. And it was a very interesting journey. I had sold 2 of the mortuary cemeteries I owned and had some extra cash and made an investment in this company, basically in buying and selling cars. And we had an opportunity to buy the Monterey Auction Company during the Pebble Beach concourse. So we bought that, and we parlayed that from that one auction to starting auctions in Arizona, Florida. We have 2 in Florida, Michigan, then private auctions as they come up at various locations, like we've been twice in Dallas, and at places where a collector has a large number of cars. And then approximately 10 years ago, we decided to go to Europe. So we did an auction in London, which was just a startling auction. It turned Europeans had never seen the style auctions that are done in America. But we did this one a little bit differently. We hired Hollywood set designers to design the set. And it made such an impression over there that we became easily recognized. And so we had customers that flocked to us. And so we ended up, quite by accident, myself and an associate got invited to the oldest and most prestigious concours at Lake Como in Italy. And they welcomed us in. Most of the time they won't let you in if they don't know who you are. But they wanted an auction. And we were having an auction in Monaco at that time. So I invited them down to Monaco, and next thing you know, we had an auction in Italy. And then we did 3 auctions at Ferrari. And that was unheard of. And I thought we would never be back to Italy again, or to Ferrari, but we actually have another auction in September at Ferrari. And we've seen Ferrari go from the little boutique car company, hand-built, to now probably one of the most impressive, most highly engineered engines and automobile that you could possibly have.
Well, Buck, we only have a 27-minute show, and you have a lifetime of really interesting experiences, and so I have to cut you off at this point, but I want to have you back and maybe talk more about that and some of your other adventures.
I think we should tell about some of the adventures of Vallejo, even you and I, and how Vallejo is changing and how we're helping Vallejo change, working with everybody as well as we can. And we've seen a big change in Vallejo in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I think that'd be awesome. Now we can do 2 more shows. So anyway,
Are we doing another one now?
Well, let me talk to the production crew. But thank you so much for being here, Buck. You're a great guy, and I really appreciate you being on the show and everything you do for Vallejo.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom, and it's my pleasure to be here,
Great.
Particularly when it's so hot outside and it's so cool in here.
Yeah, so we come full circle. All right, well, thank you, Buck.
Thank you.
So that's all the time we have for today. Our show airs at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the Comcast 27, AT&T UVerse 99, and streaming live video at vcat.tv. Come see us again next time.